call this meeting of New Iberia City Council to order. We'll have the prayer and the pledge led by Councilwoman Peggy Jarrett.
Good evening. Let's first bow our heads for a moment of silent prayer, followed by our Father, for Miss Eartha Faye Paula, who died a tragic death. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call.
Councilmember Natalie Robin.
Present.
Councilmember Peggy Jarrett.
Here.
Councilmember Robert Swear. Mayor Pro Tem Dan Doyle.
Here.
Councilmember David Merrill.
Here.
Councilmember Raymond Lewis.
Mr. Lewis called in and said he would be ill, and Mr. Bagno said he would be running late. So,
Mayor Curry, you have a quorum.
thank you. The first agenda item is public comment, and prior to public comment, I'd like to ask all of you to turn your electric devices on silent. Public comment is an opportunity for the public to address the council concerning any agenda item, but I don't think that we have any cards that have been completed, so we'll move on to agenda item 2, which is acceptance of the minutes of the April 21st, 2015 meeting as published on Friday, May 1st, 2015.
Motion.
Motion by Mr. Merrill, second by Mr. Doyle. Is there any discussion? Any objection? No objection. Motion carries. The next agenda item is a reappointment of Mr. Abra J. Rayo to the New Iberia Municipal Fire and Police Civil Service Board. And if you would correct it in your, on your agenda, it's from July 2015 to July 2018. It's a 3-year term. And he was appointed to complete Mr. Scott DeQueer's term in the position when Scott became city attorney. And so it's starting over again. He'll have 3 years. We have a motion?
Motion.
Motion by Ms. Robey,
Second.
second by Mr. Rack. Is there any discussion? Any objection? No objection, motion carries. The next agenda item is the audit report, and we have the CPA firm of Colder, Champagne, Slavin here, and we have Mr. Art Mixon and Mr. Burton Colder with us this evening to review the audit with you.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, City Council members, for allowing us to have this opportunity. And as the Mayor indicated, we've completed our audit for the year ending October 31st, 2018. Of course, we have 6 months to get this completed and sent to Baton Rouge. It has been sent. We had the exit conference with the mayor and with the city clerk, when we, our city treasurer, sometime in about April the 16th. And then, we're here to present it here tonight to the city council. It is, in my opinion, a good report. It's better than it was last year, and last year was a big improvement over the prior year. By no means, I don't think, are we out of the woods, so to speak, and that we can just lay on what we have in the past and live on some surpluses, because we don't have much of it, but we do have some. And the operations for the year were good. So that being said, I'm gonna hit some of the high spots of the report, and I think everyone has some exhibits that were given to you, and I'm gonna focus on those items. First thing is on the findings. We had 2 management letter comments this year. Everybody have that? But this was loosely inserted into the report. Let me just read it to you. It says, management should monitor millages periodically to ensure that ad valorem revenues are not over-collected. I think that has already been corrected. In talking to Kim, this was a situation that I think was brought to the attention from the Legislative Auditor's Office, and the administration has taken care of that, so that has already been taken care of. The second item was, again, nothing serious, but New Iberia City Marshal should maintain adequate supporting documentation for all expenditures. When we did that this year, we did find that there was, a lack of some invoices to support some of the expenditures. We did talk to the marshal about it, and I think that, Kim did speak with him as well, and I think y'all gonna do some monitoring on that, and then next year, we're gonna do the audit and hopefully see that there are some improvements. I don't think there was any misappropriation, put it this way, it's just, I'm gonna call it inadequate record keeping. Okay, if you go to the exhibits, let's start with Exhibit 1. And we'll talk about the revenues, expenditures, and changes in fund balance for the sewer fund. And, we did have some improvements here. The operating revenues last year were $4,697,000. This year they're $5,432,000. The operating expenses last year were $5,750,000. This year they're $5,666,000. So you were able to reduce the expenditures, and that includes depreciation, by approximately $75,000. So the operating loss went down dramatically from $1,052,000 to $235,000. You have some non-operating revenues this year, net revenues because of some grant revenues. You had a hazard mitigation grant, and that was $543,000. As you can see, last year the grants were only $22,000. Then you have the interest expense, which is deducted, and that gives you non-operating net revenues this year of $387,000. Last year was a cost of $206,000. Bottom line for this fund, income before contributions and transfers this year was an income of $152,000. Realize that we had a $500,000 grant, but still in all it is there. Last year, this same line item was $1,258,000 deficiency or loss. So it's substantially better than where it was in the past. And if you flip to Exhibit 2, you will get some idea of how much we generated on a per customer per month and how much it was costing you on a per customer per month basis. The approximate number of customers for the City of New Iberia Sewer Fund this past year in 14 was 12,218 customers, which is in Exhibit 2. The last year was 12,261. The year before that was 12,239. Income per customer per month. An average consumer was paying $37.05 in 14. They were paying $31.93 last year and $29.71 the year before. If y'all recall, I think the parish just increased the rates at the parish level, I think, to $44 per customer per month. So you're still substantially below what the parish is charging for sewer services. Operating expenses, and this includes depreciation, the operating expenses went to $38.65. That is a decrease from $39.08 per customer per month, and the year before that in 12 it was $40 per customer per month. So you've steadily brought them down by approximately $1 per customer per month, or 50 cents per customer per month. Operating income or loss, it was a loss in 12 of $10.34. That's what you were losing per customer per month. In 13, you lost $7.15, and in 14, $1.60 per customer per month. If I add back the depreciation to take it on a cash flow basis, obviously this year it was a positive cash flow of $15.37 per customer per month. Last year was only $9.73, and in 2012, $6.18. We all know that you should be covering the depreciation. So we want to get that line item where it says operating income at least at a break even or a slight profit or some profit after depreciation has been taken into consideration. And I mentioned this to the mayor and to Kim when we met. The income, you may want to consider going up a little bit on your rate, which would generate some revenues. You don't have much opportunities to increase revenues. This is one, and you still be below the parish. So I would strongly suggest that y'all consider doing this. I think you're in the process of maybe looking at your budget for the ensuing year. It is something to look at. If you just say, I'm gonna just use a number. Let's say you went to $3, you went up to $40 per customer per month. $3 per customer would generate about $36,500 per month in additional revenues.
So it's something to consider when you're trying to enhance the revenues, and yet you're still below what the parish is charging.
Do you mind if they ask questions as you?
No, not at all, please.
Okay, on exhibit one,
Yes, sir.
just to clarify, that 4,583,000, that's all sewer user fee, correct?
That is correct.
And the other part is the, what we charge in the parish to come to the plant, right?
Under a cooperative agreement, that is correct, Dan.
And the statement you made that might be a little different in the parish is that we do charge, and we did increase the sewer user fee about a year ago.
Correct.
This council did, and we use that usage, and I think the parish might be talking about per home versus usage.
Right.
That is a different of the way they doing it versus the way we do it.
But still in all, your average is still coming out to 37, and I think they're at, like you said, 44
But
per
we
household.
have a different way
Of doing it, right.
That's all I want.
But all I'm trying to do is do it by, per customer. And I would think that they're doing it by household, like you said, but it's still by customer. So, any additional comments on that? Okay, back to Exhibit 2, as I said, we did much better this year. If you would consider going up even something, the $3 like I'm recommending, or even less than that, it would take basically $1.60 to break even, assuming the cost would remain the same. So just to give you an idea, how much do we need to get up on it to at least break even, at least $1.60, assuming the costs remain the same. Okay, on Exhibit 3, we're giving you some other comparisons with some of the other cities and the number of users. And I just gave you comparisons to the city of Carencro, which they have substantially less users than what you have, but they're still charging $35.72 per customer per month. And you can see that their cost at $39.61 versus yours at $38.65. So you're very comparable on the cost there to their system. Now, they're in the process, I can tell you this because we do their audit, we're just completing it. They're in the process of going through a big expenditure for expansion of the system and also renovations to the system, which is going to be very, as y'all know, is very, very costly. So I know that their costs are going to go up quite a bit. City of Lafayette, 43,000 customers. Their average charge is $55 per customer per month, and I can attest to that because I live in the city. Operating expenses of $51.29 per customer per month, but the city of Lafayette is making money at $4, and then of course we add back the depreciation. And they're ending up similar to where you are, on a cash flow basis at $13.13, and you're at $15.37. So it's close in that respect, but again, your costs are substantially less than what our costs are in Lafayette. So just to kind of give you some indications. If you look at Exhibit 4, I'm just going to go straight through them. This Exhibit 4 will give you a good indication of, well, it's an indication of the total expenditures and the total revenues for the city of New Iberia. You probably looked at the 70-page audit report that has a bunch of funds and it's all broken out. We're required to show all of this. This is on one page. We're trying to take the final amended budget and compare that to the actual revenues and expenses that the city did. So you can see on a one-page document, what's our bottom line? How did we do relative to the budget and relative to last year? And what's the bottom line? When you bring it all together, this is all the funds. So that being said, let's just look at it. Tax revenues, you budgeted on ad valorem, you budgeted $4.2 million. You brought in $4,371,000, $117,000 above budget. Last year was $4,226,000. Sales tax, you budgeted $14.6 million. This is for the full 2% sales tax. You have a 1%, and then you have several quarter-cent sales taxes, as you know, totaling another 1% that are dedicated for various purposes. You brought in $14.9 million, $14,951,000, $300,000 more than you thought, and last year was $14,890,000. So very close to last year, but $300,000 more than what we thought. Franchise tax, $1,721,000 on the budget. You actually brought in $1,840,000. It's $119,000 better than what you thought. Last year was $1,801,000. Year before that, $1,725,000. Licenses and permits, $1,594,000 on the budget. Actually brought in $1,807,000. That's $212,000 above budget. Last year was $1,729,000. Intergovernmental revenues. And here you have 3,170,000 is what we're showing on the budget versus 3,378,000 on the actual. Again, 200,000 above budget. Last year was 2.6 million. Charges for services, which is the sewer revenues, 5,505,000. We actually brought in 5,686,000, and that's 181,000 more than budget. Last year was 4,946,000. Fines and forfeits, minimal, $4,000. Last year was $6,000. Year before that was $5,000. Miscellaneous revenues, a catch-all. The remaining amounts of $503,000 was budgeted, actually brought in $526,000, $23,000 above budget, and last year was $825,000. You can see that you budgeted a total of $31.3 million as revenues for this city. That's everything. This year, you actually brought in $32,566,000. We're $1,208,000 above budget. Last year was $31 million of revenues. So again, it's a conservative budget, and that's the way I like to see the revenues, on a conservative side, and I'm sure you like to see it that way, that we did better than we actually thought. So it's better to go conservative on the revenues and a lot more realistic on the expenditures. And let's look at those. Administration, budgeted $2.3 million, actually spent $2,167,000, $165,000 below budget. Public safety, which is police and fire, you budgeted $11.3 million, about 6.4 or 6.5 million of that is police, and the balance is fire. You actually spent $11,052,000, $253,000 below budget. Last year was $10,779,000. Public Works, $3,028,000 on the budget. Actually spent $2,326,000, $700,000 below budget. Last year was $2,401,000. Garbage, budgeted $3,893,000, spent $3,893,000, and last year was $3,702,000. Culture and Recreation, budgeted $1,001,000, actually spent $1,063,000, $76,000 below budget. Last year, $1,157,000. Urban Redevelopment and Housing, actually budgeted $1,182,000, spent $1,182,924, $800 more than we thought, and last year was $1,266,000. Utility fund expenses, which is, of course, the sewer fund. We just looked at that. You have the expenses as well as the depreciation, and you can see very close on the expenses, $3,176,000, actually spent $3,179,000, $2,000 above budget. The depreciation is pretty much, well, it's $37,000 more than what was budgeted. Debt service, you budgeted to spend on principal $1,991,000. That's exactly what you spent. Interest and fiscal charges, budgeted $1,013,000. That's exactly what was spent. And capital outlay, $2,130,000. And again, we have some footnotes at the bottom that y'all had budgeted to spend more than that, but you had budgeted also to receive more than that. So these grants, you budget based on what you think it's going to be, but those are normally modified because it depends on when the grant monies come in, and then, of course, when the expenditures are spent. So that's why we put that footnote. But $2,130,000 was on the budget. You actually spent $1,684,000. That's $445,000 below budget. Total expenditures for the city, budgeted $33,645,000, and you actually spent $32,044,000. That's $1,600,000 below budget. Last year, $31,428,000. So we're about $600,000 above last year, but you can see it's all in the capital outlay area where you spent $800,000 last year versus $1,684,000. You had anticipated having a deficiency of about $2,287,000. At this line item, you did substantially better than that. $522,000 is the surplus at this line item. That's almost $3 million better than what was anticipated. It's $2.8 million better than what was anticipated. So that's great. You budgeted, like I said, the revenues on a conservative basis. You budgeted the expenditures on a more realistic basis. And if you look down at the bottom, the revenues came in 1.2% above what you thought, and the expenditures were about 5% below what you thought. So everything was good there. Other financing sources and uses, that's minimal. And you can see then we have the grant revenues and also the other income in the utility fund. the other revenues down at, towards the bottom of the page. You had budgeted $1,440,000, you actually brought in $755,000, that's $700,000 less than what was thought. The bottom line for the city of New Iberia, y'all had anticipated having a deficiency of $845,000. This line item, you came in with a surplus of $1,278,000 for the year, and that's $2 million better than what was anticipated. So, and you can see last year the surplus was $823,000, and as I said, this year's $1,278,000. Look at the numbers for 12 and 11, 6.5 million, and right at 6.5 million in 2011 as a deficiency. Now, you did spend more capital outlay in those years, but still in all, even if you factored that out of it, you're still doing much better these past 2 years. And again, y'all should be commended, and the administration should be commended for doing a good job in watching the expenses and holding on to the expenses and trying to generate revenues wherever you can. Yes, sir.
On your, debt service, the principal, retirement, and interest and finance charges, in our budget book, it shows like in 2013, we paying like 3.7 million a year in debt with the bonds we have and everything. And this year.
In principal, Dan?
Principal and interest.
Principal and interest, okay.
And in, 2015, we project about $4 million a year that we'll be paying.
Yes.
But, and I was just wondering why these numbers are, not where that number is.
Generally, what we do is on the debt service items, those are pretty much set on a schedule, and we generally show the budget numbers as exactly what they were. Kim, I'm gonna ask you as to why the budget may be different.
The difference is the sewer debt. The sewer debt goes directly against the balance sheet, so the principal amount is not budgeted for because we budget for it, but it's not on the, like, we take it into consideration on our cash flow side, but you don't have a line item for it on your budget because it goes directly against your balance sheet account.
Okay, so does include the sewer.
Does not include the
Does not.
It's not.
Okay.
Right.
The interest is in there, but the principal's not.
Okay.
Yeah, the interest is below the line. But Dan, going along what you're saying, this is mainly the governmental funds, and you show the debt as an expenditure on the governmental funds. The sewer fund is operated just like your business, where
Totally.
the debt is showed on the balance sheet.
I got you.
So the debt, when you pay the debt, the principal, it goes against that balance sheet liability.
Right.
You see, that's the reason for it.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kim. Anything else? Anything else that anybody has any other questions? Again, if we could, mirror this again next year would be great. Possibly do better, but it's getting better. I mean, these last 2 years have been much better than the previous two that were just now shown. On Exhibit 5, you've got we looked at the operations just now of how we did last year. We did about $1.2 million in surplus after depreciation. Exhibit 5 now is going to give you a snapshot of the city of New Iberia as of October 31, 14. On that day, this is what assets we had, this is what debts we owed, and here's where that debt's going to be shown, Dan, about that sewer. And all debt, really. So I'm going to focus on the third column, which is the total for 14, and the fourth column, which is the total for 13. So the total for 14, which includes the sewer and includes all the other governmental funds, all the sales tax funds, the general fund, and everything. Look at the first line item, cash. Last year we had $15,749,000 in cash. This year we're at $14,882,000 in cash. So our cash went down slightly at this line item. Accounts receivable, $400,000 last year, $680,000 for the current year. Assessments receivable, $249,000 last year, $199,000 for the current year. Due from other governmental agencies, $2,700,000 last year, $2,800,000 for the current year. Real estate held for resale, $61,000 both years. Other assets are minimal at $260. Bond issuance cost, $882,000 last year, nothing this year. This was a change in accounting that required us, or required you and all governments, to remove the bond issuance cost. This was just a change in the accounting standards that came about, and so all governments, if they had it in the past, they have to take it off this year. We're doing the same thing with all of our clients because that's the requirements. These were costs that you had incurred when you issued it. This year we had to take them off. Restricted assets, 312,000 last year, 309,000 this year. Capital assets, non-depreciable, 6,815,000 last year, 7,961,000 for the current year. Depreciable assets, $84 million last year was the book value of your assets. This year they're at $82,019,000. What this basically tells you is that obviously we're not replacing our assets to at least keep up with the depreciation. And I think, Mayor, you and I talked about that you've got some items that you need to have some improvements on, some infrastructure type items that need to be addressed. And you should at least try and spend as much as what your depreciation is so you can keep up with it. Total assets, 111 million last year, 109 million is the net asset, or the total gross assets of the city at October 31 of 14. Now, the liabilities, what debts did you owe? You look at it, you have the overdraft. Again, that's just an accounting issue. You can see the overdraft went from 2.5 million last year to 364,000. We weren't overdrawn at the bank, you're overdrawn on the books. But that's just moving the funds from one to the other using a master bank type of situation. Accounts and other payables, 1,975,000 last year, 1,296,000. So quickly you can see that the liabilities here, these two line items went down dramatically, and yet your cash didn't change that significantly up at the top. Retainage payable, 36,000 versus 109,000. Unearned revenues, 421,000 versus 316,000. Now, your liabilities, which is your bonded debt, payable within a year, 2,416,000. And Dan, I think this is where you were talking about the principal. This is total principal that will be retired next year, the general obligation debt and the sewer debt. And that's a total of 2,416,000 of principal only. And last year was 2,356,000. Accrued compensation, compensated absences, 66,000 versus 65,804. Bonded debt due in excess of 1 year, your long-term debt. That's going from 31.6 million last year to 30,812,000 for the current year. Accrued compensated absences, 592,000 versus 596,000. And your other post-employment benefit obligation went down from 4,678,000 to 4,452,000. This is a requirement that you have to book this. This is for the post-employment benefits that you are going to be actuarially possibly required to pay down the road for the current employees. Total liabilities of the city, 44.3 million last year, down to 40 million for the current year. So we're down $4 million in liabilities. Net position of the city, net position or net surplus, if you would, 67.5 million last year, 68.9 million this year. Somebody might say, well, man, we have $70 million, we're in great shape, but we don't have that because you have reinvested, or the previous administrations have reinvested in fixed assets of about $60 million, 60 million last year, 59 million this year. Restricted for capital projects, 4.7 million versus 4.8 million. Debt service restrictions of 1,020,000, and other restrictions of about $6 million. Unrestricted is a deficit of 1,983,000. As you can see, last year it was a deficit of 3,589,000. So obviously the surplus that you generated for the current year has reduced this unrestricted deficit. And remember, this is after this other post-employment benefit that has to be recorded on your balance sheet, which is actuarially computed, and it's projected out into the future. You will pay it down the road, but we have to record it here. Yes, sir.
I got a question on the depreciation and appreciation. The structures you were talking about, can you give me an idea of which ones you were talking about, or what structures you're talking about that could bring up our depreciation?
Well, I'm talking about, like, you're talking about infrastructure type
Right.
expenditures that need to be made. I was just talking in general, and talking to the mayor. I think you have some street problems and certain issues that you'd like to see.
And all
You
of
may
our-
want
We're
to
working on
elaborate on
stuff
that.
like that
Right.
right now.
Yes,
But all of our buildings have depreciated. Everything that we own
Yeah.
has depreciated
Yes.
over
The Slyman
time.
building is pretty rough.
yeah.
Yeah.
And we're systematically depreciating those on the book basis, or Kim is.
Right, right.
And to write them down. But like I was saying, is that whatever that depreciation number is, if y'all could budget that to improve the infrastructure that
raise
you
the-
have, the buildings,
yeah,
the
it's gonna raise
streets,
the
whatever.
depreciation.
Yeah. But I don't have a list of it, no, sir.
Okay,
Yep.
so let me ask you a question, like, what we're doing right now on the second half of the street program and those things like that, that should bring more, you know, that should build up our,
Well, it's adding to the assets.
Right,
So
to the
you are
assets.
improving those assets, that's correct. And then we're gonna write those assets off over time, we're gonna write them off on the books,
okay?
all right?
This is
So-
what- And what he's saying is, we're doing a $2 million street project, getting
Right.
ready to, so that should help
That's correct,
to offset
That is
some of the
correct.
Right, right.
depreciation.
that's correct.
Right.
Yes, it will,
Absolutely.
absolutely.
Thank you.
Yeah, question.
Yeah,
Sure.
Mr. Doyle?
You made a, comment, long-term liabilities was 40,429,000.
Well, the total liabilities are 40
Total.
million. Long-term is like 30 million on the bonds, and of course, the compensated absences is 4.4 million, Dan.
Okay, so it's about 35 million.
About 35 mil, that's correct.
Cause you made a comment about the 2.4 million that's gonna be going away next year or something?
No, on the bonded debt?
Yeah,
No,
on the
you see,
bonded
the
debt.
current portion of bonded debt payable due within 1 year.
Uh-huh,
What I'm saying is that if you look at it, you got $2 million of general obligation debt. Look to the left. That's what you're gonna see in that budget comparison that I just went over. That was about, remember I said it was like 1,000,009, I think, on the principal. Well, next year is gonna be 2,046,000. And what Kim was alluding to, the difference between what we were talking about, is that on the business type activities, which is the sewer fund, that 370 is already in liabilities. From an accounting standpoint, she doesn't record that on your income statement per se. Only the portion that is for the governmental funds, the governmental activities, appears on your income statement.
okay, so
I don't know if I'm being
long-term-
clear here.
The long term is about that 35 million,
That is correct.
okay,
Yep. Yep.
thank you.
All right? Any additional questions?
Oh, one thing, on that, unrestricted, at the bottom, 1.9 million,
Yes.
that is a negative, right,
Mm-hmm.
of unrestricted monies
Deficit.
deficit.
Deficit. In other words, you don't have enough, if you took those restrictions, paid off all the liabilities, and including all these restricted things that you have, you would be short
Short
about
money.
1,000,009.
Okay.
That's correct.
Thank you.
But we know that's not gonna happen.
That's including depreciation.
Absolutely.
Right,
Yeah.
but,
Yeah.
so that, I don't want them to think we have a deficit of
You'd have to sell
1.9
your
million.
buildings
That
already.
includes, if you put your depreciation back in,
Right.
we have cash.
Yes, you have cash, and let's face it, like even that $4.4 million that we have to record for that OPEB obligation. Most governments, Dan, right now, most of them beginning to show deficits at that line item that you have a deficit, okay? And that's assuming that you paid off everything and you took some of those items already spoken for, you would end up with a deficit. But that's including that OPEB obligation, but that's gonna be paid in the future.
Yeah, yeah.
You see what I'm
It's not
saying?
at one time.
That's correct.
Gotcha,
And,
okay.
but most cities, like tomorrow, I'm going to the Lafayette Parish School Board, we have a huge deficit at that line item.
Right.
But we have really a true surplus in the general fund of about 80 or 90 million dollars. But if you look at this statement here, which is a required statement that shows everything, including that OPEB, well, then they have a huge deficit.
So they're gonna show it like that, they wanna show it like that.
They want, from an accounting standpoint, we're required. And what they're trying to do is make all governments show everything that they think they might owe.
Right.
And so they can see where you stand. But it's not affecting your bond ratings, and I thought it would have way back when they did this, and this has been a number of years. And we knew this was gonna happen, but I don't think it's affected the bond ratings, I'll be honest with y'all.
Okay, thank you.
So, okay. The next page on Exhibit 6, let's take a look more at that deficit that we just talked about. That unrestricted net position is a deficit of $1,000,009, as was pointed out this year. Last year was 3.5 million. But let's look at that. I'm just adding back the OPEB obligation because that's something that's gonna be possibly paid in the future, but quite a long ways into the future. So that leaves you with, if I add that back, it leaves you with basically a true net position, excluding this future obligation, of 2,469,000, and that's really, in my opinion, how we should look at this. So you've got a surplus on the balance sheet of 2,469,000. That would give you at least 29 days of operations. Okay, really 1 month that you'd have as a true surplus, because like I said, that 4 million, that'll be paid long term into the future. And last year you had 1,089,000 on that same line, if you make that comparison. that was only 13 days of available surplus. So you're up to 30, you need to be at 60 in my opinion and higher, okay? So we're halfway there, guys. And average daily expenditures without capital outlay, you're spending, this past year, you spent 83,176 per day without capital. Last year, you spent 83,902, so you did better. And then amount recommended for 60 days of surplus, you should be at about 4.9 or $5 million. Same number you should have been last year. Okay, you should have available about 60 days of surplus to pay operations, not capital. Okay, 60 days of operations, and is where you so you basically this year your shortage is about 2.5 mil. Last year was right at 4 million, so it's a process, but you're getting there. It's much better in these past 2 years than where it's been in the previous 2 as we just looked at. Yes, sir.
Well, I think it was 2 years ago when we really made some major adjustments.
We made the major adjustments before y'all came on.
No, we did.
Yes, we did. In October, before y'all came on, we cut 2 million, over 2 million.
We cut a lot
Yeah,
the
we
first
did.
year we were here also.
We did it
Well, we
prior
did,
to
but we cut
this
some.
council
We cut a
coming
lot.
on was when
We cut
all
some
the
also.
major cuts were
We
made.
started making
They
cuts
had
back then.
departments and that we
No,
consolidated.
prior to
Well, you
that
eliminated.
time, we cut over $2 million before y'all came on.
And the first year we got here, how much we cut, Mayor?
I'll have to look back and see, but the
It was
major
close.
cuts were made.
It was over $1 million.
When Kimberly came on is when we made those major cuts.
Yeah.
When,
So
when
on-
was
on
that?
the
What year
bonds-
was that? What fiscal? Was that in?
Kimberly came in 2012?
I think it was 12. yeah.
October of 2012 is when we made major
Right.
cuts, November 2012.
So on the bonds,
It
we
was
talked
before
about
the
bonds
holidays.
earlier.
Before the
Can we issue any more bonds, or are we pretty much to the max of what we can?
I haven't computed that, Dan. I really don't know. I can't answer that question. I don't know if y'all had the bonding attorneys look at that, if you have any more bonding capacity?
I think we have some, I think we'd have to levy more debt, you know, like a jail bond, like
Yeah.
this, even the levies, you know, another one, millage to collect for, it's not
Right.
sales tax, I mean, we're already using enough on our sales tax fees.
Right.
Okay.
I think on some of those ad valorem taxes, and Kim and I were talking about that earlier, especially like the debt service, if, you know, you'd have to ask the voters, but to get, maybe holding it at where it is, and if you have some cushion, like on when you're looking at it, just holding it at the 10 mils if you could, and then try and rededicate some, but again, the voters would have to approve that. But you wouldn't be increasing it on them, but you'd be leaving it where it is, that gives you some purpose to be able to do some bonding, to do some expenditures.
Thank
So
you.
that would be a recommendation that I would say for you to look at as well. Okay, I think if you wanna look at Exhibit 7, I give you some more analogies, but I'm not gonna go through every line item here. But this shows you where I was coming up with the amount that we're spending per day and where we're spending it. If everybody looks at Exhibit 7, you have the revenues, you're bringing in about 89,000 a day. And a lot of that, about half of that is in the sales tax area. But then the expenditures, and we came up with the $87,000 that you're spending per day. That includes the capital outlay, but you can see that, you can see how it's flowing out here. And then you basically had a bottom line of $1,278,000 as shown this year, which is about $3,000 a day of surplus. 3,503. Last year was 2,256. And again, I'm not gonna look at every line item, but if you have you may wanna glance at this. This is, just another analogy on the way that we're showing it.
And just for the public's knowledge, our most costly departments are public safety, police and fire. When you
Yeah,
get-
a third of your budget is going to police and fire. And that's really, you know, Mayor, I've kinda looked at some of the other cities that we do, and that's really not necessarily out of line. In some cases, it's less.
Except with the revenue coming in to cover those additional expenditures.
Some of them have
That's the problem.
dedications for, like, public safety. They do have some some of them have it for both public safety of police and fire.
Well, our issue is we're paying 2 million more now than we were prior to the contract with the sheriff's department, and we have no additional revenue to cover it.
That's,
So we
That's a good
started
point.
with our contract at 2.9 million in 2004, and now it's at, we're paying almost 6.5.
6.5 is
So
what
you
you're paying.
can see where our excess revenue has gone over
Right.
the years without any additional revenue.
Right. Well, many cities have gone to where they do have a dedicated sales tax that assists with public safety, and it primarily is in the police protection.
And that's our issue right now, is
Right.
that I think that, and we had government consultants come in a few years back, and they kept saying you don't have a revenue, you don't have a spending problem, you have a revenue problem. And that has been the problem over the years with the increasing cost of public safety. We've never addressed it with a tax to cover those costs.
With the revenue stream that you have coming in has been pretty much stagnant, and you don't have many ways to increase it.
What we've been doing is, as those costs increase, we've had to cut back on every other department to cover those costs, so,
But you're gonna reach a point that you, in order to continue to provide some services,
we
you
can't
won't be able to
anymore.
cut any longer.
We can't
Yeah.
cut any longer.
Yeah. But I really don't think that your public, what you're spending on public safety, I don't think is out of line in relation to what I'm seeing as a percentage of the budget that some of these other cities have, or
Right,
even
but
on a per capita
The problem is we
basis.
don't have the revenue to
Right.
cover it.
Right.
Revenues.
Right,
That's the problem.
revenue is the problem.
Correct.
Because you got a big increase, even more so now from around the country with the police departments with the new vests and the
Oh, yeah.
cameras and all of that. And
And these are all required expenditures,
Right,
David, that you have to
exactly.
make, So, yeah, it's a tough situation. And, okay, next exhibit is gonna be at Exhibit 8, and we're just gonna give you some comparisons of the city of New Iberia versus other cities based on the population that we're showing, and what the sales tax rates are, and what the ad valorem millages are. And, you're right in the mix. You're not at the top end. If anything, you're probably more on the lower end, to be honest with you. City of New Iberia, if you look at the sales tax rate of 2% and the annual revenues that you're bringing in, and what its revenues per person, it's bringing in $485 per person. City of Opelousas, they have a 4% sales tax, and they're bringing in $500 per person, but they've got budget issues big time. City of Carencro, you can see we have a 2% sales tax there. They're bringing in $382 per person. City of Leesville, we gave you 6,000 population, a 1.5%, 1.5% on the sales tax. They're bringing in $600 per citizen or per population. City of Lafayette, we're bringing in $662. City of Youngsville is at $714. City of Broussard is off the charts at
that's the two
$1893.
cities that's bringing the most revenue.
It's just, and then you have your property tax, you're at 22 mills, and that includes about half of it is a debt service millage. And then City of Opelousas, they're at 7.13, Carencro 4.6, Leesville is 18%, or 18 mills, and City of Lafayette 17.94 mills, City of Youngsville is 11.68. Broussard has no property tax because they increased the sales tax, and they just abolished the property tax. Well, with this kind of revenue, obviously, it's very easy to do. Revenues per person for ad valorem tax, $141 in this city, $60 in Opelousas. And you can see the City of Carencro is at $464, Leesville's at $63, Lafayette's at $194, and Youngsville's at $72. But look at the grand total of an average, what you're bringing in per citizen, so to speak, or per population, per person, $627 for both sales tax and property tax in this city. Opelousas is at $614, Carencro's at $847, Leesville's at $692, Lafayette $857, Youngsville is $787, and Broussard is at $1893. So again, you're right in the mix of it, and you're basically on the lower end. You're second to lowest. Opelousas is the lowest at 614, and New Iberia is at 627.
Right, well, we're way at the bottom.
But our populations are awfully short compared to the other mills.
Yep.
that you're looking at.
Yep, yep,
Well,
Except for Lafayette.
Our millage is the highest out of all of them,
yep. The 22 mills.
but how can, with just 4 mills, they pull in so much money?
3.7. Yep.
Yeah, and we pull in a little more than that with 22 mills.
Yep. But I think the analogy here, Dan, is obviously that, some of them have, like Opelousas has a higher sales tax, but hardly no property tax.
Right.
And in the Carencro, their sales tax are what they are, and then their property tax brings in some additional revenues.
But the bottom line is that we are at the bottom.
You are at the
We're
bottom when you look at it on an
The only
average.
city per, with the, average that they bring in per, citizen that's below us is Opelousas.
Is Opelousas.
We're the lowest,
Right.
other than Opelousas, with the amount of revenue that we're bringing in. And that's what I've been trying to say, is we have got to address long-term, bringing in more revenue for this city. Do you agree?
I definitely agree with you, but in most cases, Mayor, you don't have that many choices other than you have to go to the voters to
Right,
get
and
any
that's what
kind
I'm
of
talking
increase.
about, sales tax.
And possibly, with some dedications on the sales tax, and you already have some that's
Rededication of
dedicated.
And
taxes.
that's exactly.
If we rededicate some, then the potential is.
I would look at the rededication, Calvin, no doubt, and also I would look at possibly some enhancements on some
Right.
of them with some dedicated purposes. Hey,
Right.
we need something
Yeah,
for
'cause you-
public safety. Let's try and do something for that.
That
But,
might be the answer
looking
right there.
around even some other areas, and you look at Broussard, taking away the millage or lowering the millage and increasing sales tax, it's a less of a burden to the people that live here, and you all benefit. They doing that more and more. So I think
Absolutely.
you gotta give and take, you can't just continue to add. And I think in a lot of cities now, the property tax is not much, but the sales tax is high.
That's what's bringing it in.
But you can't continue, just keep going up, I think, and I believe with the millage being the highest, meaning the people who own houses in the city are paying more than the people that are using services.
That's correct.
Sales tax, everybody that comes in the city pays part of it. So I think it's something to be looked at, because it looks like that's what they're doing more and more.
There's more and more of it, there's no
doing it
question
that
about
way.
that.
Well,
Yep.
and I think,
You know.
I think if you look at Broussard, using that example, they increased the size of their city by annexing the property where the businesses were.
Absolutely, they annexed
We
it
haven't
and
done
they-
anything to grow
Right.
this
No,
city.
no.
Okay, that was my point.
And they've used some TIFs as well.
Right.
That's
you
right.
know,
TIFs is
which
big, too.
Big
Right.
time.
They've grown.
Huge,
We have not.
huge. And they spent, that's after they spent 10 million or more dollars on Ambassador Caffrey extension.
Same thing.
Done some things right, I'll tell you. I'm sorry?
Same thing what they getting ready to do off of Louisiana back there with that,
Right, they just approved the increase
Right, they
that,
just
that has
approved the
been,
increase
that
there.
was, y'all remember, that was nothing there.
Right.
Right on the interstate there, was just, it was very low land.
and that was only supposed to be for what, a certain period of time.
That's correct,
that
but they've
tax.
already, we've already paid it.
They've
So
already
then
paid
they've
it. So they're gonna-
redid it,
they
and
try
we're
to
gonna do the
redo
other
it.
side of it. Right.
Exactly.
Super One is the anchor store, but they've already got, there's plenty of development that's coming in there. But that's generated, and it's paid for itself.
But as long as you can have the people see where the development coming from.
That's right.
And see how it's gonna benefit them, they don't have a problem with it.
Yep.
You know?
Now, not all of them are successful like that, David, I will tell you,
Right.
because we do the city audit, and there's another TIF that we had established right down closer to University, right off of I-10. That one really hadn't panned out at all.
Right,
Matter
right.
of fact, they have to discontinue it, because there's been nothing that's been generated.
Mm-hmm.
But look at the one right down the road on Ambassador, on, Louisiana Avenue, and it's flourished.
Right.
So it's great. So it's just some innovative ideas. I agree with Dan, I agree with the mayor. I think we need to get some revenue enhancements. And if we can do it without impacting the citizens too severely, hopefully they would approve that. And if they do, maybe we could get some additional revenues on this. But I will tell you, it's probably better, don't just go with a general tax, so to speak, because I think that'll fail. I think if you go in with some dedicated purposes and this is what we want to do with it, I think you'll get some success.
And we gotta increase some business revenue coming in.
That's correct. That's the big
That's
thing.
what's gonna make the biggest part of them wanting to play into it.
Right, right.
I believe you let the people see where their tax dollars going, you got
Right.
a better chance in succeeding.
I agree with you, no question. Probably your best avenue, and I'm just speaking from what I know about it, is probably on the Highway 90 corridor, because eventually that'll be Interstate 49, but that would probably be your prime reason to wanting to expand and do possibly some TIFs there. There's
Right.
some
Right.
development, but maybe having more development might be a good thing there. So, the last exhibit that we have is Exhibit 9, and that just gives you some general comments, just pertinent financial audit information. I think the big thing that I'd like for y'all to look at is towards the middle to the bottom of the page where it says ad valorem revenues. And you can see where your millage is and how much they're generating. Everybody see that towards the middle of the page? Like the first one is general corporate purposes, 5.77 mils. And it's got annual revenues. How much is it bringing in? It's bringing in $1,144,000. 2.96 mills is bringing in about 586,000. 2.89, everybody see that, is bringing in 572,000, and the 10 mills is bringing in $2 million for debt service purposes. And hence the total, as Dan indicated and I indicated, 22.05 mills. Total revenues that you're bringing in with property tax is 4,371,000. Now look towards the bottom of the page. A 1% sales tax in this city brings in about $7.5 million. And you can see your 1% is going into the sales tax fund, and it's for police and fire, streets and improvements, and other pertinent improvements, including the sewer. $7,475,000. So basically, a half-cent sales tax will bring you right at $4 million, or 1 cent, $7.5 million. So, you know, it gives you some opportunities, and you can see here, this is a good summary because it shows you kind of what the dedications are on a one-page document and how much it's bringing in.
Mr. Dahl?
On the, I was looking on the fund balance, do you have anything about a fund balance in there, about the undedicated funds that we have and the dedicated funds?
It's in here.
Yeah. Like in our general fund, we have some undedicated money.
Yeah, let me just get you there, Dan. Hold on just a minute. Let me look at the.
Is it on page 18 of the book?
Yes, 18 and 19, that's correct. Okay, as you can see, all the funds, all the governmental funds you have in the general fund, 5,000,008, and the unassigned, Dan, towards the bottom of the page, it says $2.4 million. You see, you follow me there?
And what does make up the 2.4 million?
It's just non-dedicated money that we have.
Well, we have the, fire disaster fund is part of that?
That's not part of it, no.
I'm trying to ask what's part of it
Right.
there.
Yeah,
The
well, you have
fire is 3,667,369.
No, the fire,
That's the.
the disaster fund, I'm so sorry.
That's all, the disaster fund
Yes.
is part of this 2.4, isn't it?
That's what I'm asking, what brings up 2.4?
No, it's not.
No, it's not.
No,
I'm
it's a different
sorry.
fund.
That's only general fund money, correct?
Right.
That's only
Right.
general fund.
It's unassigned.
Yeah, unassigned general fund, it's nothing that's dedicated.
Right.
And right above it, though, is what's
Is
the
the
balance of the
dedication.
fire, is the fire, which is still part of the general fund,
For the fire salary and benefit increases, 3.6 million.
yeah.
That's in that dedicated sales
That
tax.
is dedicated in the general, right.
Thank you.
All right? Any additional questions or comments?
Anyone else?
Hopefully, we've given y'all a good summary of the operations. I don't have to tell you, I mean, we didn't have much recommendations because your staff does an excellent job. Kim and her staff do an excellent job for you here. She does good with the budgeting. I like the way she's doing it, and that it's conservative on the revenues and again, realistic, I think, on the expenditures. So I would say keep up the good work. Hopefully, we can get another surplus this year, and maybe look at avenues of what we were talking about, Mayor, about trying to rededicate and shift things around and possibly generate some additional revenues, but not put any additional burden on the citizens of the city, and so on. And if there's no further questions, we'd just like to thank you all for allowing us to work with you again this past year. It's always a pleasure, and just keep up the good work, and hopefully we can see another progression and a surplus again this current year.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
We appreciate you both being with us.
Thank you.
this evening. Okay, I need a motion to accept the audit as presented. Motion by Mr. Wright, a second by Mr. Magno. Is there, any discussion? Please vote your machines. Thank you. The next agenda item is a budget, amendment, and we have Kimberly here with us to discuss it. Basically, we are amending the budget to include the 2% increases into the departments. Ms. Segura? amending the budget to place the additional 2%.
Correct. The first 3 pages of the budget amendment that I had, included in the budget, in the council packet, that takes into consideration what was voted on at the last meeting to award the additional 2%, to the civil service employees. And basically, what we're doing here is if you recall, in November of 2014, we presented a budget adjustment to take the 2% that was included in the original budget adoption that y'all had pulled out. We took that additional 2% and we set it up in a reserve account. So we had probably about 95,000 across all the funds in that reserve, fund balance for salary. So I'm taking probably about 24,000 out with the adjustments. And so it's got that that adjustment's been prepared to reduce the fund balance by that amount. And so then there'll still be some additional money left over in that reserve line item for the fund balance, for salaries and benefits.
Do you have any questions
Yeah.
about that?
Question.
Mr. Doyle?
So that money that we put aside, originally I thought we put aside so it'd be for our next budget that we could allow a 2% raise for 2016, but so we're taking it now, out of it now. That's what
Right.
you're saying?
Correct.
Like the wastewater, you're taking it from their fund?
Correct.
Or you're taking that from the,
No.
you're not taking that from the
Wastewater-
90,000?
Wastewater has a reserve, before this adjustment, wastewater has a reserve of right at about $36,000. After this 2% is awarded to the employees, that, the reserve's gonna drop down to about 26,000. That's on the 3rd page.
Yeah, I saw that.
Yeah.
So no other department has enough reserve in their department to take that?
With general
2%?
fund transfers money to both Parks and Public Works. So when I did the reserve, I didn't leave the reserve balance in Parks and Public Works, cause I wasn't gonna transfer the money if they didn't use it, so I set that reserve up in general fund. Because we transfer the money to cover that from general fund. So that, those 2 funds, their reserve is built into what we have on general fund.
So you taking the, from that fund we put aside, 90,000, you taking it for what departments?
Well, there's
For
a,
Park Recreation?
in general fund is gonna pay for general fund's, salary increases, and Parks and Recreation and Public Works.
But from general
Yes, sir.
fund, you only taking 12,731?
That's it. That's what it came out to.
And in section 8, you're just taking it from there?
No, they have their, they have
have
their
enough
own
funds in
reserve.
there.
They have their own reserve.
Right,
That is-
okay.
Yeah,
So it's for Park Recreation and Public Works
and general fund
and general fund?
are all together, and then the other 2 funds are separate.
What's the total we said?
It's about 23,000.
23,000 total. Okay.
Any more questions on the 2%?
No, ma'am, thank you.
Okay, the 4th page of the budget adjustment, you'll see, some additional adjustments to both Public Works and wastewater. We had not talked about those before. The city was awarded an LGAP grant for $26,000 for equipment purchases in the Public Works Fund. So we're putting that $26,000 in revenue, and we're appropriating those expenses to come out of the Public Works Fund. And in addition to that, in this adjustment, we've appropriated, some money, $143,000 to purchase a street sweeper. And it's gonna be funded, $46,000 of the LWCC dividend that came back is directly attributable to the workers' comp, to the Public Works Fund. So that, we're gonna use the $46,000, we're gonna reduce that expense, and we're gonna add that money into the capital outlay line to buy the sweeper. And then we pulled a little bit of money off the gas and lube line because of the decreases in the prices of gas. And then approximately, well, the remaining balance is about $91,000. We'll pull that out of the fund balance from the Public Works Fund.
I got a question.
Question?
Maybe it's
Mr.
not
Dahl.
time to ask it, but,
Go ahead.
you made the comment about the money from works and comp that we got back with that check last meeting. So you divided that through each department? And
It's-
put the revenue back in each department?
Correct.
Okay,
It's as a credit to the expense.
okay.
That's how we always handle that, isn't it?
Right.
Well, we
It's
send it
based
back
on
to
the total premiums that are paid by the different, for the different classes.
So for being safe, we get to utilize it maybe and purchase some equipment. I like that.
A bit.
Good.
So,
And then the final fund that we're adjusting is the wastewater fund, and we had received, the city received $420,000 from facility planning, for some work done, I think it's called Tributary D. So we're just appropriating the revenue and the expense, and this contract's already been taken care of, it's just that I hadn't put the money in the budget, so it's just taking, it's housekeeping more so. Any
okay,
questions?
any questions?
Nope.
No, I'll wait till the budget meeting.
Okay, I'd ask that you please, vote your machines concerning the, wait, do you have a motion and a second? I'm sorry, we need a motion
Motion.
and a second to
Second.
accept the amendment, the budget amendment, and then vote the machines. Who made the motion? Mr.
David.
Merrill, and a second by Mr. Bagno. Are there any further questions? Please vote your machines for the budget amendment, to approve the budget amendment. Motion carries unanimously. Okay, the next agenda item, thank you very much, Ms. Segura, and I wanna take this opportunity to thank Ms. Segura and her staff. She has done a tremendous job in finance, working with the budget. You know, you can see the strides that we've made over the last couple of years. I also wanna thank the department heads and the employees, but the department heads have worked very closely with me and with Ms. Segura to follow our budgets as closely as possible, to be fiscally responsible. And I wanna thank them because they've done a tremendous job. So thank you, each and every one of you, for the work that you do.
And I wanna say thank you too, 'cause it's very well self-explanatory. I could exceed better, and I understand it better. Thank you, Kimberly.
Okay, the next agenda item is announcements. The next city council meeting will be held Tuesday, May 19th, 2015. Tesh Farmers Market and Food and Truck Festival will be held Saturday, May the 9th, in Boohoney Plaza along Fulton Street. The market opens at 7 a.m. and the food trucks begin selling at 10 until 2. Music will be provided, and it will be Foxfire will be the music, the band that'll be playing. The next neighborhood watch meeting for District 4 for Mr. Merrill will be held May 21st, 2015, at 6 p.m. at the Slyman. And the City of New Iberia will hold a public meeting to consider and adopt the 2015 millage rates on Tuesday, June 16th, 2015. We had to redo the millage rates, there was an error, but the error was, positive to the city. I mean, so anyway, that's it. I'd
Can
ask
I
for,
add something?
Sure.
Mayor? I want the public to know they're having a day of prayer at Montcalvary Baptist Church Thursday night at 6 p.m. in honor of Miss Bertha Faith Holland, who died such a
thank
tragic
you,
death.
Mr.
Thank you,
Ryan.
ma'am.
I'd ask for a motion to adjourn.
Motion.
Motion by Mr. Merrill,
Second.
second by Mr. Bagno. And at this time, we'll have a budget meeting. You can continue filming if we still have time. I think we had 2 hours. You can continue videoing. Okay, Ms. Segura?
Can I, ask a question before we start?
Sure.
Just 'cause we were on it and I don't know when
Okay,
it's gonna loop
go
back
ahead.
in.
That's
So while
fine.
it's still freshly being discussed.
That's fine.
The workman's comp, the check that we received at the last meeting, what was the approximate amount that we received last year? Because I remember it being significantly less.
I'm not exactly sure. I know it was more than 200. I'm thinking about 207, and this year we got 276.
Yeah.
I can look
Okay,
it
it
up
was
for
that much
sure.
last
It was
year?
two something, but
Yeah, it
it was
was
the
over
highest
two.
we've ever gotten last year. And this year we beat it by a bunch, so.
We can email it to her in the morning.
Okay, and so, did you had a projection of what that was gonna come back this year, or were you surprised again?
No, last year when,
Cause remember last year was kinda like a shock.
last year when the budget was prepared, the workers' comp rates that I used, well, first off, we didn't find out what our rates were gonna be until right that policy renews on November first, so we found out, you know, within a couple of days of our fiscal year starting, so our budget had already been adopted, and I was actually short, cause we did have a premium increase. I wanna say, I looked at it the other day, I wanna say it was about $50,000 or $60,000 off on the expense side, so I budgeted, I didn't budget enough premium expense, about 50 or 60,000. So when the dividend check gets posted as a credit to the expenditure account, the 276 minus the 60, so we still have about, you know, a $200,000 credit in those accounts.
Okay, and then like I noticed in the budget book for this year, like, what are actual, like for instance, like in Parks and Rec, the actual for 2014 16,000, but for 2015 we adopted 35,000.
That's because that credit went back last year. You're talking on the workers' comp?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay.
That credit was posted against that expenditure, so we try it, when I budgeted, I budget not anticipating that we're gonna get that dividend check, cause we never know if we're gonna get it or not.
Mm-hmm.
So I use what the actual rates are.
Mm-hmm. So when we're getting this extra money back, like so this year, you know, it's even more, roughly $60,000 more. We're getting it back, and then you're putting it back in the same line item. And so are these departments spending that excess down, or we're maintaining that and holding it?
No, it stays in that workers' comp line, but like on the public works fund where we asked for it tonight, we're taking the savings in the public works fund and we're appropriating that to buy a street sweeper,
Okay.
so. Or a portion of that is going towards the
Yeah.
purchase.
We had some money left in that fund.
Yes.
In the Public
Yeah.
Works Fund. Normally, when you transfer from the general fund, we would really zero out, but we had money that was left over.
Correct.
In the Park and Recreation Fund and the Public Works Fund. So, part of that was being used to purchase a street sweeper.
Kimberly, is this a used street sweeper or a new one?
No,
It's a new one, you're going for new,
And-
and that's
and-
how much about,
Oh,
The price estimate that we have is 143.
that's cheaper than what I thought,
And-
okay.
I
We
thought
also
it was
put
like
it out for bid.
200-something
Yeah.
thousand.
and let me tell you, it's smaller than what we have now. And Leroy can probably tell y'all a little bit more about it if you would like to know. We can't afford the larger one, but at least this is gonna be
It gets
better.
us something.
It's gonna be
Well,
better
I
than
think,
what
you
we
know, it's
have
good-
now.
Good
It'll
fiscal
be just
management, I
one.
think we're doing a
It's
good
just
job
one. We
of-
really
of-
need two, and we need the large one also, but we're gonna get the smaller one,
I can understand that, but I think they need to be a little more careful with those street sweeper and take care of them when they're using them. I have been noticing a lot, and
Right.
paying very close attention.
well, anyway, I
Right,
think
so-
it's gonna help us at least
think
for a
that's
little
pretty good.
while to kinda get through this crunch that we've had with a lot of maintenance on the street sweeper, so until we can find some additional
Mayor, I have to be
revenue.
excused.
Sure.
So I'm gonna leave, I spoke to Kimberly earlier,
About the-
so
I
I
know.
think we're okay, so, thank you, I appreciate it.
All right, thank you.
Bye-bye.
Okay, do you have anything else, Ms. Robert? Did you have
Not
something?
at this moment, no.
Okay, well, we'll start and go through it, and then if y'all have questions as we go, don't hesitate to ask. Okay, we're ready.
Okay, if y'all wanna go through the department detail, I have, prepared the summary for the 5 months, that we've completed so far into our fiscal year. 5 months, out of the 12 months is approximately 42%, so the revenue and expenditure line should be somewheres, in that vicinity. I'll do the revenue section first, and then I'll go through the expenditure section. City court is at approximately 30%, and I know I tell y'all this every month, but, we get, a check from the marshal's office. That check comes, like, say, May 1st, but it's really for April, so it gets posted as a deposit in May, so it looks like we behind, but at the end of the year, we'll catch up with 2 months on the backside. There aren't very many departments that are, you know, below that 42%. They're all pretty much right at that 42%. Finance is a little bit higher. It's at almost 60%. Ad valorem taxes have all been recorded, so that I guess it's like a false impression, you know, that, and then the rest of the revenue will come, and then that number will sort of, level off as we go through the fiscal year. The other larger percentage, is in the permits department. They're at 60% of their budget. Parks and Recreation and Public Works, at 68 and 50% of the budget. And again, they also have an ad valorem millage in those two funds. And so as we go through the fiscal year, that'll level off. On the expenditure side, I wanna say that there's three departments that are logged at higher than the 42%. The first is, insurance, they're at 60%, and I know I've said this again, I'm sorry if I sound repetitive. We pay our property insurance in January, we pay 100% of the premium in January, so, as we go through the fiscal year, that percentage is gonna decline as we, go through more months. And also on, in the finance department, our software contract is paid in December, and it's, somewhere around $30,000, so as that expense, as we go through the fiscal year, that percentage will come more into line with what it needs to be at the end of the year. And then the other department that's higher is police and fire civil service, and it looks like it's a lot higher, but they only have a $2,000 budget. And actually, there was an ad that ran that we really didn't have money that was budgeted for. It was a, they ran an ad, for one of the firefighter exams, and the ad was pretty expensive, but I say it was expensive, but in accordance with, what they have budgeted for that department, I mean, anything's gonna look like it's outside of the range, just because we have so little budgeted in that particular department. But all the other departments are, right at the 42% or lower. So I don't think that we have really any areas, that are, operating outside of where we should be at this particular point in the fiscal year. Did anybody have any specific questions regarding any of the funds?
Anyone?
I mean, like, yeah, we just going through these, or we?
I wasn't gonna go through all the individual pages. If you have certain ones that
I
you
have
wanna
just
address.
a quick question,
Oh,
because
that's
it
cool.
was something, I'm just trying to keep up with stuff we've recently touched on. And we had the issue, and it was supposed to come up at the next meeting, and then it didn't, with the maintenance of the parks.
We worked it out, we're just working it out with the park, taking care of their own property.
So the park is gonna maintain their own parks?
Yes, and we
Yes.
had enough money in their budget for him to hire 2 work release people in their budget.
Okay, so we're not transferring
Not
that money
transferring anything.
anymore,
Nope.
that was originally suggested.
No.
Okay, because I did notice that on the, and maybe I don't know if they had to purchase something or whatever, but on the Parks and Recreation, the, expenditures for their grounds maintenance, they're already at 73%. Is that from, do we know what that's from? Is Mr. Miguel
I
here?
don't know where he went. He was here.
Oh, he left, okay. Okay, and I was just kinda wondering what had that percentage at that point.
Oh, that's exactly what it is.
What?
Limestone at the Acadian Ballpark.
Oh, okay.
Limestone at the Acadian
Ballpark, thank you, Mr.
Okay, so
Leroy.
he had to take a chunk of his budget out for that.
Huh?
So he had to take a chunk
Right,
of his budget out
right.
for that. Okay, that's what I was wondering. Okay, and so that has been resolved and we're not transferring that money. Okay, I'm good, thank you.
Park and Recreation is cutting the grass for the city now.
Well,
Public
they're
Works.
cutting their parks, but Public Works is still doing a lot of grass cutting.
They're doing a
They
good
still
job.
doing all the grass
They're
cutting.
doing a good job, the
For
yards.
compliance, many other areas, but the Parks and Recreation Department is doing their own, they're doing their own parks.
Yeah, good job, Public Works.
Kimberly, since you, the question came about Acadian Ballpark, we have that leased out to a private company.
Yes.
Do we have any idea of, I mean, we just said we put that much money into the park in Limestone. What kind of revenue we getting, or how do we stand, or can we have some kind of report on that?
I don't have it in front of me.
No, but no, we
Yeah,
don't need it now.
You can get it, you'll make a note, you can get a
Get maybe,
report.
I remember they were
Revenue.
leasing it out to someone and see if we even come out ahead on it, and what's the, and whenever, I mean, it's gonna affect us right now.
Okay.
Thank you.
Any other questions on the
Anybody else?
financials?
I think I'm okay.
Okay. Next.
The other thing, the other item, to discuss is the sales tax collections, and I had included it also in your packets. Last month, we were at approximately a, 1.5% decline for the fiscal year thus far, so it was for 5 months. Now we're at 6 months into our fiscal year with the collections, and our decline is at 2.3, so it did increase. We realized a 6% decline for the month of April's collections. I did talk to Pat Segura, and he told me that the school system actually achieved a 5.5% decline.
Well, the parish has an increase.
He told me just for the school system,
Yeah.
for that one particular month, that they had a decline of 5.5%. So our decline was at 6%, so it was, you know, right around the same percentage. If you recall, I had budgeted a 1% decline when we adopted fiscal 15's budget. I was actually off on my calculations by about 0.5%. So if you take the 1.5% out of here, we're slightly below 1% off target where we are, you know, currently. So
We're
we'll have to
hopeful.
continue to monitor.
We're hopeful that will
you
pick
know,
up, that will pick up that 1%.
So you went in at 1.5%, you said?
Well, I was off by 1%. I really was achieving, trying to get to 1%, but then when the collections actually came in, I was off by a 0.5%. So
Okay,
it's like we would have budgeted for a 1.5% decline.
That's what I mean.
Yes,
okay.
yes. So it's like less than 1% off at this particular point. And 1% of the 14 million, you know, it'll be $140,000. So,
If it doesn't continue.
right.
Finish it?
Yeah.
Just got a question about, you know, you just said I adopted that budget at 1.5% decrease in this, so we only like 1% off, or less than that, as you mentioned. But what I was still concerned about, I think, our budget that we adopted last year, we plugged in that $1 million that that we had money left over from the sewer plant when we built it. Didn't you find
Oh.
some money in the fund?
Yes,
It's
the
in the
1.2
construction
million.
In the
fund.
construction, it was one, I don't know.
Right.
But then we plugged that money into our budget for this year?
Into
Correct.
sales tax.
Okay,
Not in-
A portion is, let's see if I'm recalling, it was right at about 1.6 million, and 1.2 went back to sales tax, and about 450,000 went back to the wastewater fund.
but then we took it from the sales tax fund and put it for our budget, right?
Well-
We don't have that money no more.
Well, I've already moved it back to
Yes.
the sales tax fund, and it's in the sales tax fund.
Will we, I mean, if our taxes go down less than we projected, do we have any of those funds left to plug
Yes.
into our budget?
Oh, yes,
Okay.
yes.
Right.
Yeah, I think I mean, I don't have my book with me, but, if I'm remembering, we should have had a fund balance of right at about $1 million at the end of fiscal 15 on the 1 cent. So we still have fund balance there. It may have been about between 800,000 and $1 million, somewhere along those lines. And then, you know, like, if those funds don't use up all that money, I don't
Right.
transfer the money out of the sales tax fund, you know, into the general fund to cover, say, police and fire. I'll only transfer exactly what they need, so it's highly likely, if they're not spending everything, I'm not gonna transfer everything, so then that money is gonna stay in that fund, and it's gonna stay accumulated into the fund balance.
Cause we mentioned earlier about the, street cleaner, that we have to get 90,000, or we had a balance that was coming straight from Public Works.
Correct.
That's access that we can get to, that
That's
we don't
right.
have to transfer nowhere.
Right.
That's correct, that's
Okay.
correct.
Thank you.
And earlier you had a question about the disaster fund, I'll just show you.
Cause I
where
saw
I'm
on there, it
now.
said disaster fund on that audit, it says disaster fund at page,
But there was no amount next to it, right? It might have just been on the
Um,
form.
cause you said they had about 260,000 left in that disaster fund.
The disaster fund's balance sheet is on page 73 in the book.
It's,
You see it on page, 73 is the
Yes.
first column,
283?
283,000. So that is separate from the 2.4 million in general fund.
Correct, that's what I was asking.
Okay.
Cause it said disaster relief, you see on page
Right.
74?
Yeah, you see where, and this is, the way that we're required to report our financials, we're required to report on our major funds. And our major funds have to be reported separately from our non-major funds. So you're required to present those individual funds, all on the major funds, and then you, in that last column where it says total other governmental funds, you have to combine all your other non-governmental funds into that one column. So that's why that, you can see that 283 on page 19
Right.
as well. And that's all it is it's carrying it forward from that back schedule.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So 283 is,
The
on page 19, you said?
Correct, that's it,
Uh,
that's the disaster fund right there.
Cause that's where it says, oh, that disaster relief, okay.
And basically, that's why it says that. It says that it's assigned to disaster
Right.
relief because the council has implemented, the transfers to there. It's not it's not a legally, required, tax money that needs to be reported.
It's not
And it's
dedicated.
because the council actually, appropriated
we
that
had-
money to the,
Didn't we take $500,000 out of that for our budget one year?
not a half, we took
300
three.
something.
Well,
Okay.
it was probably
We
close
did it
because
for,
we did.
the salary increases one year.
160 and then
Okay.
another 3 for, debt service.
Okay, thank you.
That's all I have. I don't know if y'all have anything else to discuss.
I have something, if not, if y'all have a minute. In line with what the auditor was speaking of, I wanna go on record as stating that the city needs to look to the future to bring in more revenue. We cannot continue, I have a year and a half, a year and 7, 8 months left. We can make it for that time. But I'm concerned about the future and about having enough money to continue to pay the increases. We have a CPI with our sheriff's contract every year that increases. Right now, in our sales tax, we're still getting a rebate for garbage and recycling because the revenue is not increasing enough to cover their CPI. So I think that, we need to think about the future. I had proposed that, this is my thought, and I want the council's ideas on this. I thought if you are not prepared at this time to go to the public to ask for a half-cent sales tax, for a 10-year tax, consider a 1-year tax and do it for just capital projects, and I'll tell you why. Because that 1-cent sales tax that we keep talking about, that brings in 7.3 million, was originally passed by the citizens to cover public safety, which includes fire and police, and also capital projects. Well, it brings in about 7.3 million. Police is costing us 6.5. And the increases we have with the fire department, we're having to go into the general fund. The rest of it's being used, a little bit of it for debt service. So there's no money to do repairs on buildings and so forth. So I had each department come up with priorities, and I'm just gonna tell you for you to think about it. Well, first of all, I think that at some point we need to set aside somewhere between 70 and 100,000 to continue with the demolitions. And, we are demolishing some buildings currently, but we need to keep our city clean and to be able to continue with that process. Also, it would cost us about, $211,000 for 1 year, in addition to what we pay Gordon's, for him to pick up the yard waste and the debris every week like he used to. So I think it would be incumbent upon us to try and do it for a year. Let the citizens see what the benefit is. The city looks filthy. Picking up just twice a month is not enough for the mattresses, the white goods, and all the debris that's out there. So that's a thought. The other thing is, I didn't total Jane's, I'm sorry. Jane's is minimal, what she, asked for, it's, in her department. I don't think it's more than it's not even $10,000. Maybe 10, well, it's a little bit over 10, maybe 20,000 max, for things that she needs in her office, capital outlay. for repairs to City Hall, and I can give y'all copies of this. Repairs to City Hall, our buildings are in dire need of repair, and we have not had additional funding to do that. For City Hall, it's about $626,000. Things like replacing the chiller, painting the building, you know, taking care of issues that we have with City Hall. Fire department, we had $75,000. They need full sets of bunker gear, and I want the public to remember, the sales tax that has been passed for the fire department is only for increases in salaries and benefits. We cannot buy a fire truck, we cannot buy gear, we cannot buy uniforms. So they are in need of 32 full sets of bunker gear, $850,000 to $875,000 for a ladder truck. All of this is gonna affect your rating in the future if you don't have proper equipment. $400,000 to $425,000 for a new pumper. So I figured the fire department needs about 1.4 million right now for capital projects. The Slyman needs about 13,000 in improvements. West End Park needs about 102,000 in improvements on that building. City Park improvements, about 158,000 on City Park and the Senior Citizen Building. The Senior Citizen Building needs a new roof. Part of West End needs a new roof.
Roof and ceiling.
Um,
A roof and ceiling.
let's see what else. When I got finished prioritizing, we were close to the amount of money we could bring in with a 1/2-cent sales tax. Public Works needs about $1 million. Sweeper, excavator, dump truck, bucket truck, trailer excavator, tractor and mowers, zero-turn mowers, weed eaters, blowers. I mean, this is all equipment that they need for day-to-day operations. I told Vince he couldn't have any money for wastewater because they have revenue. Well, he has revenue coming in, plus you get every grant that we apply for. He gets, you know, he's gotten, LCDBG, grants, and you're doing better than the other departments at this time. So this is just something for y'all to think about. If we're gonna consider, you know, putting a tax on the ballot, we need to look at it pretty quickly, and my thought was we ought to put it on the November election, which would be the runoff election. There's not as much on that ballot. It gives people the opportunity to concentrate more on what we're trying to do. The thought is to either do a 1/2-cent sales tax and present it for these capital projects, tell the public exactly what you're gonna spend it on. 1-year tax, that's it, and then we'd improve all of our equipment, all of our buildings, you know, get the city in really good shape. And it may help us to increase our revenue in some respects because we won't be repairing a street sweep at $11,000 every time we turn around. So I thought this was a thought. The other thought is, do you wanna go to the public and say, we need a 1/2-cent sales tax to supplement that 1 cent, which is for public safety and capital projects?
Got a question.
You know, so it's just something we need to think about. Mr.
I have a comment more
Merrill?
than anything.
Yes,
I think that tax for 1 year is something that, I think we can look at, and I think the citizens might wanna look at. That might, you know, cause if we can do the tax for 1 year and get everything we need for all the departments, if it's working out for us, then we can look at maybe bringing it back to the citizens and see if they would allow it to go on for another year to be able to do other improvements. You know, like we might need maybe a new swimming pool in the West End and a few other things too that we can use. But I think a 1-year tax would be something that would be appropriate for what we're trying to do. Lafayette has done it a few times. Look where it's taken them. I'm saying that they're not locking the citizens into 5 or 6 or 7 years at one time. So I'm all for it myself.
I have to agree with Mr. Mayor and the mayor. We need new money.
Right.
We need new money. We don't want a tax, but we will not grow and prosper if we don't pay us that tax. We need things in our community. My constituents are asking about the pool, the building, and this. We don't have any money. We need to get some money in and consider the tax because I'm tired stressing, trying to explain to them why. We need new money. There been no new money for how long?
This is
20?
my 11th year in office, and we have not passed a tax or really increased.
And you look at Lafayette, Broussard, and Youngsville, they passing tax. That's
Right.
why they just look around how Youngsville have prospered. Broussard, pretty soon it's gonna be bigger than us. So we need to consider, they put a park in Youngsville, $10 million, beautiful, got the walk track and everything. We need to be consistent, we need to think about progress. We need to progress and put all our thoughts on the side. A 0.5% sale tax will generate 7.7
No,
million.
about 3.7
3.7
million, 3.8
And we
million
could
for
do
1
a
year.
lot with that, a lot, please.
And
Consider it,
and we
please.
would have everything, the public would know what the money would be spent on.
Before.
Exactly.
It would be, we would let them know
Yes.
exactly. Ms. Rowland, did you have something?
If this is something we go forward with, when is our deadline to vote, to pass?
I would
to
wanna
vote?
put it on the next council agenda. I have a meeting with our bonding attorney. I think it's next week. He was on vacation this week. For him to give us an idea of how we can propose a tax like this, where the public would know. I mean, and I didn't reinvent the wheel. I thought about it when I saw where the airport passed an 8 or 9 month tax in Lafayette, and started thinking how we were in need of equipment and building repairs and so forth. And if we could do this, it would really be a boost for the city. It looks like we're trying to build our revenues as best we can, but it would help us with some of these other things that are needed. I would like to put it on the next council agenda, because we have to go through the process.
Right, no,
Right,
yeah,
right.
exactly,
Process
that's why I'm
starts.
asking
Right.
this, cause if we're gonna do it.
Yes, process. You have to announce.
I guess where I stand on it is, one, and I've said it before, I'm not comfortable putting things on ballots when nothing else is on them. So I find it's a lot more favorable to get an honest opinion of the public if we have it when they're actually gonna be going out to vote for other things. I think that this is probably an ideal time to put it on there, and also with other things being on the ballot, it will keep our costs down. I know that it will cost us to do it, but at some point we have to be able to say, well, at least we tried something. I mean, we've cut and we've done a lot of that, and I mean, at the end of the day, it's just gonna be up to the citizens of what they wanna do, but I feel that this will be an ideal time to get a true feel of what people want, because the people who are gonna vote in the runoff election are the true compassionate people that care about what's going on in this community. So I feel like, we need to look at it, and just go from there. At the end of the day, they're gonna give us the answer, and I'll accept whatever they wanna do.
And
What-
we as council members need to be very positive about this.
Right.
Yeah.
Very positive and support this tax, because, our city really is dying. I'm serious. I look around. If y'all
It
have
is.
eyes, just open it and look. We need the money to generate these funds to do these things. Please, be positive.
I
I
think
think
that
too-
every citizen will benefit from this, but from the
Yes.
street sweepers to the yard waste pickup to improvements on all of our buildings. I think everyone will be able to benefit from it.
I think another thing too is the citizens, I've talked to citizens at my neighborhood watch meetings and different things. They have a lot of citizens that would look at promoting a 0.5% sales tax if it's done appropriately, as far as they can see where it's gonna take us in the future. Because a bunch of us up here is not gonna be really here running the city in the next 10 years. But if we've been physically, fit as far as, our budgets and everything for the last 4 or 5 years that we've been doing, we're actually setting the pace for the next people that's coming up. But we have to set the pace for them on advance of promoting extra money coming in for them to be able to know how they're gonna take it to the next level. We can't just leave and get out of it and expect them to be able to figure it out. We have to set the pace for the next generations to come to keep this city going and moving forward.
Well, with your consent, we'll bring something and put it on the next agenda, and I'll see if we can have,
I mean, I'll look at anything. I mean, I'm, not a closed-minded person. I mean, I think do this, see what kind of response we get from the public, and then, you know, after that, all we can do is look at, I guess the next option would be how these other municipalities have lower property taxes and higher sales tax. I mean, you know, we just have to come at the people until they connect with us.
We can't lower our property taxes till we increase our sales taxes because
Right, because to
we
offset,
won't have
to
enough
offset,
revenue,
right,
we will not
exact-
have enough revenue down in the
Exactly,
city.
exactly, I know, I'm just saying, you know, we have to take it one step at a time and just listen to what the public tells us.
Right. Well, I appreciate you at least considering it.
But
Mr.
Mayor, that's
Dahl?
sort of, you know, I was asking earlier about that, you know, I think we gotta give to ask to receive. I don't know why we can't put something on the ballot to say we're gonna decrease some of your property tax to implement a sales tax. So there's no question about what we're gonna do or what we were promised to do, because we are paying the most property tax. And I think it's not fair to our citizens that live here. I believe in sales tax, but I don't believe we should have high sales tax and high property tax. I think, you know, we need to somehow negotiate something where the citizens that live here and pay these property taxes, like you said, 22%, even though the monies are not there, it's the highest in the area.
Well, the
and increase the
reason
sales
it's high,
tax.
Dan, is because of the debt service for building, am I correct? Most of it's for the wastewater plant, that 10 mills.
Six something, I think.
Yes, a lot of it is because of the wastewater plant.
But we got 22
We don't
mills.
have, but we don't have that much money that's coming in totally
right.
for other departments. And until we can get this city in good shape, I don't see where you can start cutting. We need to bring in
Right.
additional revenue, and once the city's in a position
Then we can
where
come back and
you have
look
enough
into it.
revenue coming in, then of course you can look at cutting back. If you looked at the comparison
I looked
for
at the
every
comparison.
department, the money revenue that's coming in per individual citizen, we're the only one that we're ahead of is Opelousas. Everyone else is bringing in more revenue per individual than we are. And that, I mean, we just can't continue.
Well, you look at all the others, Mayor, I think, you know, they did away with some of that property tax, you know, then they did the sales tax. So,
We can't do away with any property tax
No.
and not increase sales tax. We couldn't operate.
but you can do it in the same resolution or same, when you
No,
project.
I think you're wrong,
Well,
but,
that's my opinion,
Your
we all
opinion.
got one, and that's why I can't support it until we give something
Right.
for that, but I support sales tax, I believe in sales tax, but I don't believe in a high property tax and a sales tax, that's just my feeling on it.
But they have a lot of other stuff coming in too,
Right.
like tips and,
3.5%.
you know, and
in
all of
Broussard
that.
and
That's
Youngsville.
making a big difference too, yeah, Dan. You know what I'm
Okay.
saying?
Yeah, they're bringing in 3.5% in sales tax, and we can only go up 0.5% without going to the legislature. So, okay, we'll have something for y'all next time.
Okay.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.